an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 2, Episode 11, Donut Run. In this episode, Veronica and Duncan are some tricky motherfuckers, and they are able to pull off a pretty enormous con. However, it comes at a kind of steep price. Veronica's father's trust. I hate that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Rachel for commissioning not only this episode, but a voyeur version of this episode. Those of you who are interested can go to the Facebook page and watch the video of me viewing this episode for the first time live. And you can see about like halfway through, I started to suspect that there was something that was going on, that Veronica and Duncan had planned it, mostly because of the phone call where it really sounded like she was talking to a recording. But yeah, I really enjoyed this episode because even though I sort of figured that out, there were still other surprises, and it didn't take away at all from the reveal of what was happening, because this is really serious shit. So, all right, let's back it up. So last episode, Meg died. And it's a really sudden, what it feels like narratively is that the show needed to get Duncan out of the picture for whatever reason. And I really like Duncan. You guys all know this. I was kind of rooting for the two of them to get together. I was hoping that they weren't related, because he is a good-hearted guy that is willing to like stand up for people and just has decent judgment. All of that felt like a good choice. But you have to admit that gets boring. I am not entirely sure, and you guys can all help me out if you are able to, but I don't know if this is a spoiler. I am still not really sure what's going on with Kendall, because this episode has Veronica coming back to the hotel room and acting like she's catching Kendall. And I don't know if that was just for Logan's benefit or what's going on there. But the whole thing doesn't seem to tie into anything else. So I'm a little bit confused about it. But nevertheless, so I understand how the writers just kind of are like, having Duncan in Veronica's life really precludes a lot of directions that we could go in, because he is like being her boyfriend is sort of like making it that if she hangs out with other guys, or like the viewers are going to be less receptive to any sort of relationship, like the one that she has with Wallace, for example. Wallace is like, he's occupying the one slot, the boyfriend slot. And if she has a actual boyfriend, I feel like they are going to be less willing to have her just hanging out or pairing up in terms of like allies with other dudes, because there is a weird sort of intimacy that comes with that. I might be reading into it a little bit too much, but I feel like there was not a good way for her and Duncan to end their relationship when they're still in school together and have it feel like she is able to really move on and get him fully out of the picture and also keep him being the good guy. So it's a kind of a weird position that they're in, where Duncan is just a little bit boring for the story, but they needed to do something with him, and they wanted to keep him as a positive force. So they decided to like create this pregnancy that makes him run away. And it is a weird turn of events. Like, honestly, I respect the hell out of the fact that they are trying to keep this kid from being raised in like a freaking fundamentalist household that's going to be abusive. Like, more power to them. But it is a huge step. He is abandoning his old life, which is right there on its own, a huge move to make. Like, that's not that we haven't seen him be willing to do that before. You know, he has run off before, and he only came back because Keith found him and tracked him down and made him come back. So we know that Duncan really didn't feel like there was much to worry about in terms of leaving his old life behind. But also, putting on top of that, raising a child. That's another whole kettle of fish, because he not only has to worry about himself and his own health, but he has to learn how to parent an infant alone. You know, like, I just can't imagine. He's got the assistant girl with him, but I don't know that she's staying, right? She's not going to, she's going back. The assistant, does that mean, with that reveal, that his mother was also in on it? Or was that all her betraying his mother? And her also betraying Estelle? Is that her name? I couldn't quite tell whether or not it was her, like her involvement signified complicity on the mother's part or not. I don't feel like, I didn't think so initially, but when I rewatched it, I kind of was like, well, maybe. Celeste, that's it. I knew it was something with the sky. Celeste, Estelle, you know, you get it. I don't think his mom was in on it. Okay. I don't think she would ever be okay with Duncan leaving forever. That's really what it was. Like, at first I was like, oh, maybe she was in on it. And then I was like, what? She wouldn't be cool with him just fleeing like this? Like, absolutely not. Okay. So that's interesting. I wonder how long she'll be able to keep that a secret. Because I imagine that somebody like her, it's going to be noticed that she's missing. Like her, I feel like Estelle relies on her enough, it looked like, that this, maybe she just like took some days off. I don't know. But I feel like there's no way that this like goes without being like, Veronica or the assistant is going to have to answer to this at some point, I imagine. But anyway, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. The episode starts off with the scene that I was talking about where she goes into the suite and Kendall is there like toweling off and saying that she's here because she was invited. And there's a little like, you know, tete-a-tete between her and Logan because Logan's acting like she's pathetic and she's kind of like, oh, really? I'm so pathetic until you want to get laid. And then all of a sudden it's fine. And I'm really just totally unsure what the hell is going on with that. And then we go to the fight between Veronica and Duncan. And the first time I watched this, I was really taken aback because Duncan is being so unreasonable and it's just not like him. And that's part of what, once we have the phone call where she's talking to a recording and it seems pretty obvious that she's talking to a recording, I thought back to this scene and I was like, yeah, and that was out of character. Maybe this is all a setup. That was part of what tipped me off. But in the moment when I was first watching them fighting, I was just like, what the fuck, Duncan? Like, seriously, she was being so much better to you about impregnating your ex-girlfriend and keeping it a secret than you had any right to expect. How can you be this shitty to her now? And as it turns out, he can be this shitty to her because it's scripted. They've planned this all ahead. So there's this very public fight and breakup in front of a bunch of people who can attest to it if anybody questions them, or just so that it's in the air, like everybody at school is talking about it. And that helps lend some credence to the idea that she did not help him escape. But surprise, this is just all very carefully planned out. I would love to know exactly whose idea a lot of this was. I would have loved a little bit of a flashback to the planning stages to see who comes up with what ideas. What's the name of the other PI who's so shady? Is it Tony? He has some name. Vinny, that's it. I was like, it's a real Italian, like, 2-syllable name. Vinny, that's it. He is... I was so excited, to be honest, to see him back. I'm hoping this isn't the last we see of him, because his character is just fun. And I really... The fact that he winds up being in on it in the end as well is so beautifully on brand. Whoever will pay me, I'll do what you want. Like, that's all it comes down to for him. And you know what? Some people, that's it, and I respect that. So they have this big fight, and then we go to this long, drawn-out, like, Veronica moping in her room, playing a bunch of sad songs, and her dad growing more and more concerned as he hears the music playing and sees that she's not coming out of her room. She's in her pajamas all the time. Like, there is just, you know, the whole setup did feel so cliched, but at the same time, I wasn't suspicious yet, even though I kind of should have been, because this is so also textbook. And I don't know. I'm looking back and I'm just like, I should have known something was wrong, because Veronica would not handle it this way. But she's specifically staying in her room and making sure that her dad knows where she is the whole time, so that it can be a lot more believable that she had nothing to do with Duncan disappearing. So yeah, he finally comes into her bedroom and talks to her about what's going on. And, you know, when she's like, well, me and Duncan broke up, he's like, yeah, I kind of figured that part out. And there's an interesting moment where he asks if there's anything he can do, and she says she just needs some time. And he leaves, and the camera zeroes in on her face. And if she had been really faking this breakup, she would have been fine when he turned his back and walks out of the room. But the thing is, she and Duncan are breaking up. Like, they have to say goodbye to each other forever and never speak again. And so she has the genuine grief to draw from for this performance of actually losing him, and losing him in a much bigger way than her father even suspects, because I am sure Keith is like, oh man, she's bummed because they're broken up, but they've gotten together again before. I am sure they're going to be okay, and they can patch things up. They'll see each other at school every day. Eventually they'll probably wind up back together. He doesn't know that it's much worse than it looks, actually. This is essentially like Duncan died, you know? So the depth of her grief here in this moment where the camera zeroes in on her, it's a lot more clear where that's coming from on the rewatch. Yeah, and I'm not always able to rewatch these episodes, but I was glad to get to rewatch this one since there's that twist, to be able to look at it all through different eyes. So let's talk about what's going on with the Felix killing and Logan and Weevil pairing up. You all know how I feel about Logan and Weevil. Like, these two together could accomplish so much. I would really love to see, honestly, like, Logan would be a really good sort of like organized crime lord, and having Weevil as his like second in command. Like, obviously, I really think in the end, Weevil's smarter than Logan and deserves to be number one. But the way the world works, the guy with the money is in charge. So we'd have to have Logan be the one in charge, and Weevil would be his confidant / enforcer. And they would probably be able to rule California if they really put their minds to it, if they wanted to. I feel like, forget about it. It would be a done deal. And I am here for them being on the same side right now. Like, I know it's not going to last. I know it's not going to... Shut up. Shut up. I know. Okay? I know. Let me enjoy this. Like, I just really... Their minds work similarly enough that they're always in concert with each other, but they come from such totally different experiences and backgrounds that they have very different resources, they have very different approaches to things, and they can each get things done, but they have to do it in totally different ways, which I find really fascinating to watch. And this whole thing with them trying to figure out exactly who is the one working for the Fitzpatricks is pretty clever. Like, what Weevil's decided that he needs to do is just find somebody who's going to be looking for a drug that's a lot harder than weed, basically. Some Molly, something. And whoever from his crew is able to sell it to him is almost guaranteed to be in with the Fitzpatricks. Now, it is fair to say, I think this is a good plan on its face. But if somebody is betraying Weevil from the inside, there's no way they're falling for this, right? They have to know Dick is best friends with Logan. I guess the thing is, they can't know that Logan and Weevil are working together, but they might be able to tell if they're really paying attention to things. I don't know how, it looks from the information that we have as viewers. It looks like they're doing a good job hiding that they're working together, but I don't really know that for sure. And I just can't help but think, even though it feels like in the end, when he gets the information about the tattoo, that's sort of decisive, I'm not totally convinced that this means that Hector wasn't full of shit. Either, okay. Let me follow this through. So what they decide to do is have Dick try and get some E. And first of all, y'all, can we just talk about Dick for a second here? I want Dick to die. Can I just be honest with you all? I hate him so much. I hate him. He is toxic masculinity plus white guy entitlement on steroids. The whole, he's a rapist, essentially. I mean, he's over here in multiple narratives being totally fine with knowing somebody is about to, date rape a girl. And in my opinion, if you are aware of it and you're fine with it, you are also a rapist. That's just it. I have no doubt that he would do or has done something like this. So right there, no. And then he has this little conversation with Veronica where he's like, you've got to, if you're going to be dating a guy who's worth millions of dollars, you just have to be willing to look the other way when they decide to get a piece on the side. Because to him, it's like he's doing you a favor being with you. Get the fuck out of here, man. It's so gross and demeaning and again, entitled. It's so disgusting. So, but all that said, I did really enjoy when he's reporting back to Logan and he tells him one of them told me to perform sexual intercourse upon my own person. I thought that was so funny. It was just so well phrased. So, yes, I hate Dick. He's the worst. But that was a really good line. So Dick goes in and gets E from Hector. And Logan passes along the information to Weevil, who then goes and confronts Hector. And Hector is swearing up and down that he would never talk to the Fitzpatricks. It has nothing to do with them. That he knows a white kid who sells, but he figured out that Dick didn't know the white guy sold and didn't know that he could go to him for it. And so he went to that white kid, got a supply from him, and then just charged Dick double. And that's why he did it. Which, to be fair, Dick did tell Logan he charged me the 09er discount, which is double. So that story does line up. But I gotta say, I don't trust Hector. There's just a vibe. He's constantly trying to sow discord. I'm sure that this is a red herring of some kind. Him constantly trying to be like, well, I just don't think Weevil's handling this right. Well, if it were me, I would have done something about it by now. Like, I think the show is trying to throw me off the scent in some way, but I do think Hector is up to something. I don't know if it's specifically being in league with the Fitzpatricks, if he's lying to Hector in this scene or not. But there is something going on. And I think, I don't know, I think I wouldn't say he's straight up lying, but I feel like he's got designs. Like there's definitely some sort of agenda here, you know? I don't know what it is, but I just don't like him. I don't trust him. I don't like him. So anyway, he makes this defense and he wants to know who the fuck it is that's stealing the white kid. And it turns out to be what's-his-face, whose dad is a butler. I can't remember his name. But he is, like, the whole idea to him that he would be in league with the Fitzpatricks is laughable. Like, when Weevil says something about it, he's just like, dude, are you kidding me? They will literally blowtorch your skin if you are short one dime bag. It really is not worth it to me to get involved with people who are that brutal. I'm not that stupid. And I believe him. I really do. But, you know, I don't know. Sean. Thank you, Alice. Sean. I believe him when he says that he's not with the Fitzpatricks, but he won't tell him who his supplier is, and I can't help but think maybe whoever his supplier is might tangentially be working with the Fitzpatricks, and he doesn't even know. Who knows? I don't really know how the Fitzpatricks work and how many, you know, how many pies they've got fingers in, as they say. I hate that saying, though. I don't know why I even used it. I wonder if it's the plastic surgeon that Veronica had talked to a few episodes ago, that she saw him go into the cigar shop, and, you know, he's in there for a really long time, and she winds up going in, and later her dad warns her that he tried to bust that place several times because he knows that they deal drugs out of there, but he was never actually able to get anything. So I kind of feel like that's somebody that feels more like Sean's speed. Working with a crooked plastic surgeon, a kid like him, who pretended to be, like, rich of his own, you know, like, that really feels a lot more in line. But I don't know. Then the question is that plastic surgeon working with the Fitzpatricks? Potentially, you know? I mean, that cigar shop, the fact that her dad knows enough about it to, want to bust it, that points to the fact that there's way more activity going on there than just one person. So, I don't know, you know, there's all kinds of directions that this can go in, and I am not really buying that anybody is telling Weevil the complete truth here, and I feel like Weevil feels the same way. You can feel the frustration rolling off him in this scene, because it seems pretty clear that this kid is not lying, but Weevil doesn't really have another step that he can take at this point. So, I have to say, too, the actor who plays Weevil is like a foot shorter than Sean in this scene, and like a foot and a half shorter than Hector in the previous scene. And yet, there is no doubt that he's the one in charge. I feel like it really takes a certain kind of person to be like having a confrontation that's filmed from the side, where you are shown to be so much shorter than the other, and yet there's not even a moment when you're just like, oh no, he's kind of at a disadvantage here, isn't he? You'd never feel that way. Yeah, Weevil's a pretty solid dude. I enjoy him as an actor. So, all right. Logan is hiding in the stall at this point, and Weevil says, do you believe him? And Logan says, don't you? And Weevil is just like, I don't know what to do at this point because I know that somebody in my crew is mixed up with them. That's the only explanation for how shit's gone down. And Logan says, has it occurred to you that maybe the one who's involved with them is the one who died? And he says, do you remember the other Fitzpatricks that went here? And apparently they were like held back in school so far in order to continue dealing drugs. They were like purposely doing badly in school so that they were able to be on location selling drugs to other high schoolers, which is a really wild notion to me. Like, you must get a lot of business at a high school to be that motivated to keep people on the inside. I just like, I don't know how many of you had people like this at your school. There was one, in my opinion, that I really like got mad about. My boyfriend in high school, his name was Mike, and he had a brother. I don't even remember his brother's name. It was like John or something like that. Maybe Jason. And Jason was like 4 years older and had dropped out of high school and was like just getting high all the time and getting into a lot of trouble. And he finally decided to clean up his act. And he went back to high school. He was just young enough that they were able to like allow him back in, but he was like years ahead of the grade that he was in terms of his age. And he stuck out like a sore thumb in all of his classes. And it was such a weird thing because I really did not like him. He was not a good person. He wasn't smart. And he, as much as he was trying to get his life back on the right track, it felt really artificial to me in a lot of ways. It felt like he was just trying to put on a good face while he continued to do shady shit. But everybody at school was so congratulatory of the fact that he decided to come back and finish out and graduate. And I was so because I was closer to it than most people were. Dating his brother, I was able to see him at home in his natural habitat and know that a lot of the act he put on at school was a load of shit. But other people didn't know that, and they completely fell for it. And it was a really like kind of surreal experience to see everybody falling all over themselves to congratulate this kid for turning his life around when he was really just doing like the bare minimum and being so false about it that I thought anybody should be able to see through it. And I wonder now, like seeing this, I'm like, he was like definitely dealing when he decided to stop and reform himself. It would not surprise me if he pretended that he wanted to be back into school so that he could get access to other customers. That makes a ton of sense. So retroactively, I'm just sort of like, that motherfucker, I bet that's exactly what that was about. But at the time, I was just like, okay, so he wants to graduate. Congratulations. All of us want to graduate. Get over it. Fucking finish school then. Why is everybody throwing a fucking parade for this kid? But yeah, anyway, Weevil's talking about that, and he says, as soon as this school got smart and expelled them, my predecessor, the Reaper, decided to expand our business. His name was Gus. They call him the Reaper. I can't tell you, if I had the name Gus, how quick I would try and get a nickname. Gus is like the worst name in the world. I'm sorry to any Gus's out there, but you must know. You have to know. I'm not telling you anything you don't know already. And Weevil says a couple months in, he disappears like Jimmy Hoffa, and no one has seen him since. Do you know why the Reaper was called that? He was Felix's big brother. So no, Felix wasn't working with the Fitzpatricks. No way in hell. He says this, but guess what? He goes and gets a tattoo, and the tattoo artist is like, oh, by the way, your friend that died was gonna get this huge chess piece, and I kind of thought you might want this stuff back that he left with me to come up with the art. And it is a picture of him and Molly Fitzpatrick. So it seems on its face to be really clear that, yeah, Felix was in with the Fitzpatricks, and that is probably why he was killed. But I don't believe it's that simple. I feel like it's really unlikely that Felix is the only one. Maybe he is. Maybe there's just the one. But I don't know. And the whole story that he tells about how it was Felix's older brother who disappeared. Could it be that Felix is in with the Fitzpatricks in order to try and get revenge for his brother because he thinks that the Fitzpatricks did away with him? Or does he know what happened to his brother and his brother's fine and not dead and just managed to get out somehow, or is doing something else somewhere else? It's not like they found a body. He just disappeared. So as far as we know, he's not dead. And maybe Felix knows that. I don't the question that really in the end matters is, what is it that he did that caused him to get murdered? Why did they need him gone? And what a bummer for fucking Logan that he happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was pure chance that I don't know if the Fitzpatricks knew that this was going to go down and orchestrated it. Maybe if Felix had been talking to them about what was going on with the gang, he could have said to them, by the way, we're all about to head out and take down Logan because, Weevil just found out that Logan killed his girlfriend. So he thought at the time. And the Fitzpatricks saw an opening and decided to swoop in at that moment because they realized that Logan would be the perfect patsy. But I'm just really curious about that because I don't know. I kind of am going back and forth in terms of what I even think happened there. Yeah, I don't know, guys. What are your theories? All of you know what happened, so I can't ask you. But yeah, this whole mess is really, I don't know. It's an interesting direction for this show to go because the PCHers have felt just like a kind of a amorphous crime force on the edges, the periphery of things, really just so that Veronica can call upon them if she needs backup for things or if she needs anything done. There's never been a vibe to me that this show is going to get into organized crime and what that's like or how it works. And episode 11, if this is as long a season as the previous one, we're only about halfway through. So there's a lot of room for them to start getting into more. And I can't help but wonder how effective they're going to be with this, because introducing the Fitzpatricks as a whole entity is a tricky thing to try and do, especially if you're going to try and make us care about any of them. I'm not sure that's the direction the show is going to go or not. But if they're going to want to humanize any members of that gang, that takes time and finesse. Maybe they are just going to be the big bad of the season. Maybe that won't be how it works. But overall, it's just a pretty big play to make, and to have it really, we had the one encounter with them where Veronica follows that guy into the shed and back, where it turns out that this is, a whole bar. The River Styx, right, is the name of the place. It's a scary scene where you really know that they mean business, but it's the only time we've ever met any of them. So I feel comfortable saying they're really only starting to get involved, truly involved, halfway into the season. I'm not sure how this is going to work, if this is going to be effective or not. So yeah, I'm going to withhold judgment and we'll see how it goes. But it's just it's a big move to make, and I have been covering, for another Spoil Me series, I've been covering Deadwood. And I think that the slowness with which that show moves has spoiled me a little bit in terms of my expectations for things, because they do things so gradually there. Let's talk about Wallace now. Wallace is back. He tries to tell Veronica a whole story about how he came back because their basketball team in Chicago was no good. And he absolutely has to be able to play. And he's wanting to, get into colleges with that kind of scholarship. And so he came back because it was going to work out for him. Well, just by random chance, of course, as the show works, it turns out that Veronica gets an assignment where she has to look up the stats of the school basketball team. And when she searches his name specifically, she finds out that the team in Chicago was really fucking good. And I enjoy that the show decided to have it be for a school assignment, because otherwise the only reason to find this out would be because she is checking up on him like detective style. And it's pretty clear that the show is trying to have Veronica mend her ways and not be that kind of friend to Wallace anymore. So it would be pretty disingenuous for her to try and be like a better friend to him, but also be looking into shit behind his back. So she stumbles on this all by accident because of this assignment, which works for me. So when she confronts him about it and it's just like, what happened? Why would you even lie about that? He tells her that there was a kid who was the number one player in the entire nation at his school. And basically, he was a superstar of the kind of caliber that, despite still being in high school, the red carpet was already being rolled out for him everywhere. And I don't know how many of you guys have encountered this sort of thing in real life, but I haven't. I have only heard about it secondhand. I've seen it on TV. I've read articles, that kind of thing. It doesn't at all beggar belief that this is how it would be handled, this whole situation. This feels completely correct. This kid is driving this really slick car. He went to a party and got drunk. He says he's okay to drive. And Wallace and some other players are in the car with him when they take off from the party. A wino stumbles out into the road and they hit him. And he doesn't stop. He keeps driving and goes to his uncle's house to ask what to do, rather than finding out if the guy is okay, calling for help, anything like that. And Wallace just can't live with it. He can't continue going to play with this team, knowing what happened. But Wallace also doesn't do anything about it. And he has a lot of guilt surrounding that. Like, Veronica tries to kind of be like, well, you're a good guy. And he's like, am I? Because I could have said something or done something, but I didn't. And I just really don't like what that says about me. But I also don't know what else to do. And this kid's uncle, who is like his agent and manager and everything all rolled into one, he says something like, oh, you probably just hit a dog. Don't worry about it. Like, this was not even a person. Which, if the guy is homeless, unfortunately, society will likely agree. Who cares? You know, like, he's nobody, so whatever. It doesn't hurt anyone except for him. Nobody cares he's gone. And just keep your mouths shut. Millions of dollars are at stake. And so, yeah, he comes back. But, you know, he's thinking, if I come back, I can forget about it. But he's like, I can't. And Veronica asks him, why didn't you just tell me that this is what happened in the first place? You can tell me anything. And he's like, I couldn't tell you because you would have stayed and you would have done the right thing. Basically, I was too ashamed to tell you that I essentially ran away. And you know what? That makes sense. Like, we have all been here, right? Where we just cannot bear to be honest about something we did. It's like, I know you love me. I know that you think the best of me. And I really cannot see the look on your face when you find out that I did something like this. And it's obviously a huge amount of shame for him. He says, I'm embarrassed that I didn't. And later on, when he is out in the parking lot, he gets approached by a police officer who is investigating. And he tells him that the guy that they hit is paralyzed now from the waist down. And this line, and I said this while I was watching it, because I really, this whole scene is actually pretty good. Wallace is so nervous when this guy comes up to him. He's leaning against Wallace's car, and Wallace is intending to put his bag in the trunk of the car. Anya says, isn't it a journalist? Is it? Okay, I thought it was police, because the whole vibe of the guy. But I don't feel like he identifies himself. He just says something about, like, I want to ask you some questions. But let me see. Are you Wallace? Yeah. Oh, no, you're right. Ernie Sayers, Chicago Statesman. Yeah, you're right. I totally missed that part. I was hoping to ask you a few questions. So Wallace is trying to get into the trunk of the car with his key, and his hand is shaking so badly that he can't get the key in the lock. So he just winds up like walking around and putting the bag in the front seat instead. And that little moment I actually really liked. It was just sort of a, I don't know. There was something about that more than anything affected me, that Wallace is really nervous about this whole thing. So yeah, the dude is telling him about this kid, this homeless guy who's now paralyzed from the waist down. And Wallace says, so what was the question? And he says, well, I guess the question is, what kind of man were you planning on being? Guys, that is some shit right there. That is effective. Holy shit. Any difficult decision that I am going to make in my life, I'm going to ask myself, I'm going to step back and ask myself, Natasha, what kind of woman were you planning on being? And just let it ride from there. Because Lord knows you can't run from that question. That's not even asking in a judgmental way. It's a real question. Like, there's not it's obvious that there's judgment coming from this guy in particular. But the question itself is so even and objective that it's just impossible to hide, Like, there's no way to answer that and not betray yourself and insult whoever you're talking to by pretending that they believe whatever bullshit you're saying. Like, I love it. Of course, that kind of question assumes that a person has a conscience. So it's not going to work on everybody. But I just love that in principle. Like, I'm here for that question. It's great. So, yeah, I loved this moment, and I love that the scene ends there. He asks that, and the camera pans to Wallace's face, and he just kind of, like, does this deep breath, and then end scene. And I am going to assume that Wallace did the right thing, because he was already saying that he felt shitty for not doing the right thing in the first place. And there really is, when you have this sort of guilt, you really do need to be pushed. Like, it's not there's a sort of inertia that happens, I feel like, where you're so guilty that you wind up standing still because any sort of move you feel like is going to make it worse, but you also haven't taken action yet, and you don't see why you should go back on what you've already been doing. But if somebody comes up and nudges you, you know, it's sort of like, all right, well, you take it as almost a sign from the universe, you know? And I am really hopeful that Wallace took this opportunity. He doesn't owe that kid shit. The kid made a big, terrible mistake and is letting money and fame and the promise of it, not even existing, but the promise of it, completely dictate how he decides to handle himself out in the world. And you mark my words, with somebody who is that gifted, who is going to be offered the opportunities that he will be, this will not be the only time that he does something terrible and faces no consequences because of it. If you let somebody get away with this kind of thing once, they will do it again, and they will do it worse. This is the kind of thing that leads to dudes raping women but still being on the NFL team. They're able to drag their wife or girlfriend from the elevator by their hair and beat them up on camera, and everybody sees it and nothing happens to them. This is where it starts. So I understand the temptation to be like, it was one terrible mistake. He's very young, but you have to let people cope with the consequences. You cannot, just setting them down a road where they will be given every privilege in the world and not tempering that at all, you're creating a monster. So I just hope to God he does the right thing. So anyway, let's get back now. I think I've dealt with all the little side dealies, and I started off talking about how I felt with the overall plan that Veronica and Duncan came up with, and that it's really ballsy. Let's talk about Sheriff Lamb, because this is the most amusing thing in the whole world. Sheriff Lamb gets basically sidelined from the hunt for Duncan by the FBI because Duncan has abducted a kid and is crossing state lines. Like, this is a big deal. And the woman who is playing the lead on this was Ron Swanson's wife on Parks and Rec, and as everybody reminded me in the chat, also played Xena, which I completely forgot about. So great. I love her. I was so excited. And she has no time for Sheriff Lamb. Oh my God, it's beautiful. She is just so irritated with him right out of the gate. He is making more of himself than he should. It's very clear. And he even says something at one point about how, like, he thought about going out for the bureau, and he thinks he might. Because he's so secure that he would be an asset to the team. Like, he's used to being, as she puts it, big fish, small pond. And this is the syndrome that I think a lot of us, in a really small way, can probably relate to. Like, I think a lot of us were gifted in school and probably wound up being some of, like, the better students or maybe better artists or whatever at our school. And we got a little cocky with it. And then we went out into the big bad world to college and realized we are not a big deal at all. Outside of our tiny little microcosm of school, there are plenty of talented folks out there. And now all of a sudden we're up next to them and we were able to sail by, and it suddenly isn't that impressive anymore. And I really feel for him in that respect, because it is a shock when you're used to being hot shit, coming up against folks who actually know what they're doing and have serious jobs. I am sure that it's a bit of a slap, but at the same time, he has no humility about this at all. And it's kind of infuriating because he also is correct. He's telling them to be careful about dealing with Veronica, and they're very dismissive. They're like, we've literally questioned Al-Qaeda operatives. We're going to be fine. And they're not like in danger, but they are underestimating Veronica, and he is right. She is in on this and knows what's going on, and there's a whole plan. So his paranoia, he's really like on point, to be honest. But he's so predictable that Veronica and Duncan know that he is absolutely going to go and search for Duncan himself. And because he is in a sheriff's car, that is the one guaranteed way to get across the border without being searched. So Duncan hides in the trunk and crosses the border, and I guess has the baby in the trunk with him? Does he? Or what's-her-face has the baby in the truck when they pick him up, right? So he's alone in the trunk. And somehow she got the baby across the border already. And Sheriff Lamb is like, I love whatever song it is that they chose to play while they have him like driving around like mad trying to track Duncan down. It's so perfect. I love how the song will stop as soon as he gets out of the car and goes in somewhere, and then as soon as he starts his engine, it starts up again. There's just something so comedically brilliant about the way that they play him chasing his own tail and just being unaware of how completely he's played into their hands, you know. Rebecca says, I always assumed she and Vinny crossed with the baby pretending to be a family. Rebecca, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Thank you. So he goes into a couple different places. There's one Hispanic dude that he shows Duncan's picture, and the guy says, I don't know, you all look the same to me, which I fucking died. Because you know what? Him holding Duncan's face up next to his own face, they do look really similar. Honestly, I mean, it's clear Duncan's way younger than him, but their hair is styled the same and almost the same color, and their face shapes are very similar. Like, dude has a point. So anyway, he finally like crosses this railroad track, and it causes the latch to come loose on his trunk, and he pulls over to get out and close it. And when he opens the trunk, he sees all of these water bottles and like snack wrappers and realizes that Duncan was in the trunk. Like, he realizes that he got completely played. And it's too late. We see Duncan standing on the side of the road, and he has this full-on disguise. I mean, I didn't recognize him. You know, it took me a second to realize, like, he's got the facial hair and a wig and a hat and a really baggy, like, sort of hippie-style outfit, and the pack. The whole look, he really does just look like he's a backpacker that's been on the road for quite a while. And he gets picked up by Vinny and What's-Her-Face, and they, like, pass by Sheriff Lamb coming from the opposite direction, now realizing his mistake. But he's not looking for Duncan with a group of people. He thinks Duncan's going to be alone. So this car full of 3 folks that are driving by, he completely ignores. Duncan puts the hat on again for a second to, like, as a precaution, but he really didn't need to. Lamb wasn't paying any attention to them. And I love this moment. Like, it's just so satisfying. I love what a fool Lamb has made of himself. And, you know, like, I really wanted there to be this whole, like, I liked the fact that the show had Lamb do something good 2 episodes ago with the baby in a corner, where he lets off Veronica and Duncan, even though they had broken into somebody's house because of the abuse. And I was really congratulating him on that. But in this episode, he tells Veronica that he shouldn't have done that he feels like he fucked himself, basically, by doing that. He made a big mistake and wound up screwing himself, and sort of takes back all of the goodwill that he got from me in that episode. So now, screw him again. I'm back to square one, where I'm just like, fine. And I love the fact that he will have humiliated himself in front of the FBI. I really want to know what they're going to think when he comes back. I don't know if the next episode will show any of the fallout after this, but I would be curious to see if they are aware that he went to Mexico to attempt to track Duncan down on his own. I'm sure he's not going to tell anybody about the trunk thing, because I think he's going to be too embarrassed. But I'm just curious about all of that and how it shakes out. And I love the scene between Veronica and her dad. It's such a shame. I'm like really bummed out by it, because the ultimate trust and closeness that the two of them have had on this show has been a linchpin for what makes this show feel so good and different. So many shows that involve high schoolers also involve those high schoolers constantly lying to their parents. And Veronica doesn't always come out and be completely honest with her father, but she is able to tell him the truth in the end, every time. And knowing that the stakes being this high and the danger being this real for her changes everything for him. It's understandable why she kept it from him. It's understandable why he's as angry with her as he is. And she tries to say, like, I had to do it. You don't understand. They were abusing their kids. And he says, it's not just your life. I would not survive without you. And that line really, like, there have been a couple times in my life where I have been either I was at risk or thought to be at risk. And my mother has said things like that to me. Like, I literally, if something happened to you, I think I would actually die. And that moment you can see Veronica really kind of like thinking for the first time about those consequences, because it's clear it did not occur to her. And her father saying, I will always love you. Of course I will. But I don't know how I will ever trust you again. That's heavy. That's a real moment from him, you know, like and it's clear it hits her hard, because you could just see on her face that she realizes they have somehow turned a corner here. And it's a part of growing up to a degree. Your parents realizing that you are not only willing to betray them or deceive them on that level, but also that you are capable of it. Like, that you could get away with it and actually fool them. That is a real marker in the relationship between a parent and a kid. I feel like all of us probably have stories like that, where our parents started to look at us a different way because they realized we had lied to them about something pretty significant. And it's just unavoidable, to be honest. This day was gonna come, because Veronica has been up to some really serious shit in the past too. And this just happens to be the one that he really knows the most about and sees how serious it all was. But it was going to happen. There's just an inevitability to it, you know? And I'm not excited about watching their relationship change. It's sad, you know? But there's, to a point, you can't avoid it. So, yeah. Rebecca says that's one of my favorite Keith and Veronica scenes in the entire series. I tear up every time. Yeah, he acts the hell out of that scene. Just like the desperation that he's trying to really get her to understand why he's so angry. Because it's clear when she first walks in, she doesn't get it, you know? And she just thinks, you're just mad because I lied and I'm in trouble with you. And he's like, oh, it's so much more than that. Like, this is changing everything for me. And you need to know what I mean when I say that. So, yeah, this is really good and really sad. But I would think that Veronica would say the price was worth it in the end to save this child. So even if she knew this was going to happen, I think she'd do it all over again. All right, well, I've gone over time a little bit, so I'm going to wrap. But thank you guys all so much for coming and hanging out with me during this. Thank you very much to Rebecca for commissioning this. Or no, I'm sorry, to Rachel. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at Rebecca's name at the bottom here. But thank you to Rachel for commissioning this and for commissioning the live watch as well, because those are always really fun to do. And I really appreciate you guys always being in the chat to help me with names and stuff when I miss stuff and lead me along the path when I'm missing what's happening. So I enjoy doing these live. It changes the way that I cover stuff and it helps a lot. So thank you all. And I will be on vacation next week. There'll be little bit of a break before the next episode. I don't actually know when the next one is. Let me look at June, because I feel like it's not going to be for a little while. Yeah, it looks like the next one isn't going to be until like at least the third week in June. It's going to be a while. So I'm sorry, guys. There'll be a bit of a break there. But I got booked out so fast all of a sudden. People were just, I don't know what happened, but day before yesterday, it was like everybody decided to book at the same time. And all of a sudden my calendar just filled to mid-July. So, okay. Anya says the next episode isn't until July. So you guys are going to have a bit of a wait. I'm sorry about that. But, if you are listening to this and you are at all interested in making sure that I continue to cover these, join the Spoil Me group on Facebook. I think it's just facebook.com/groups/spoil me, I think. But you can get in on planning out who's going to commission these and make sure that they're a little bit more consistent if you're able to pay $35 for an episode. So, I'll just put that out there if anybody is listening to this and is just like, a month? What the fuck? If you're willing to pay $35, you can speed this up for next time. So just to, Megan says, worried about the 2-month cutoff. This should be okay. Yeah, you're going to be all right. But the 2-month cutoff, I instituted that because there are some things that it's just really tough to jump back into it if there's too long a break. But I will be kind of deciding that sort of thing on a case-by-case basis. I just like to have that policy in place so that I can say that. So, and Anya says that they have a messenger group. So, yeah, if you join the Spoil Me group and bring up that you'd be interested in helping out with commissioning Veronica Mars, I'm sure they'll add you to that and you can talk to everybody. So, yeah, guys, thank you for organizing this and all working together so that I can cover it. And I'm sorry that you all had to book it so far out in advance. Spoiled marshmallows, says Megan. That's right. I forgot about that. That's fun. You marshmallows. All right, guys. Thank you all again so much. And I will be seeing you in a while with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.